Welcome, everyone. I call this hearing to order. And today we're privileged to hear from two nominees, Jennifer Clyburn Reed, whom President Biden has nominated to be the federal co-chair of the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission, and Christopher Frey, whom the President has nominated to serve as the Assistant Administrator of the Office of Research and Development at the Environmental Protection Agency. We warmly welcome both of you today. Before we hear from our witnesses, Senator Capito and I would like to say a few words about each of them. Dr. Jennifer Clyburn Reed has built an exemplary career as an educator and advocate for strengthening the economic, the social, physical health of communities in her home state of South Carolina. I just wrote this in, I hope this is correct, a proud Gamecock. Is that proud Gamecock? And graduate of the University of South Carolina. Dr. Reed has spent nearly 30 years as an educator and an education leader. Most recently, she was the director of the Center for Education and Equity at the University of South Carolina, her alma mater, and co-director of the Apple Core Initiative, a scholarship program at the USC College of Education. She's also CEO of the Palmetto Issues Conference, an issues-based advisory group that promotes accessible and equitable policies in education, in health, in housing, and infrastructure. I had the privilege of meeting with Dr. Reed virtually yesterday, found her to be an engaging leader who is deeply committed to helping communities across Southeast Crescent region. And if confirmed, Dr. Reed will be the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission's first federal co-chair since it was created in 2019. Just let me repeat that. If confirmed, Dr. Reed will be the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission's first federal co-chair since it was created in 2019. Having her in this role will allow this agency to fully commit its resources toward addressing economically distressed areas across parts of Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. So I'm delighted that Dr. Reed could join us here today. We look forward to hearing her vision for this role. I'm sure she'll introduce a couple of relatives and maybe some friends that are in the audience, but Senator Capito and I have had the privilege of serving with your dad, and it's a special privilege to welcome him here today. I'd like to say that we could see his lips move when you speak, but with a mask on, we won't see his lips move at all. But we know he's here to provide encouragement and support. President Biden nominated our second witness today, Christopher Frey, who I believe goes by the name of Chris, to serve as EPA Assistant Administrator for the Office of Research and Development. Dr. Frey has built a remarkable, accomplished career as a pioneer in the fields of modeling human exposure to air pollution, as well as the measurement and modeling of vehicle emissions, and applying those emissions estimates to risk assessments. At a time when the EPA is recommitting itself to science-driven decision-making, Dr. Frey's experience makes him an excellent choice to lead research and development at the agency. Dr. Frey has been a professor for 27 years at North Carolina State University, where he has dedicated himself to research and cultivating the next generation of scientific leaders. He also has extensive experience working with the Environmental Protection Agency. In 1992, Dr. Frey was a AAAS. I'd never heard of a AAA. I've heard a lot of AAAs, but a AAAS, Environmental Science and Engineering Fellow at EPA. And he has served as Exposure and Modeling Advisor in the EPA's Office of Research and Development's National Exposure Research Laboratory from, I believe, 2006 to 2007. He's also served in several other capacities at EPA through the years, including as a member of the EPA's Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA, affectionately known as FIFRA. Science Advisory Panel from 2004 to 2006, as a member of the EPA's Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee from 2008 to 2012, as chair of that committee from 2012 to 2015, and as a member of the EPA Science Advisory Board from 2012 to 2018. Let me also add that Dr. Frey has received public support from 7 of his predecessors for this role, including both Republicans and Democrats, going back to the Reagan administration. There may be no better endorsement for a job than from someone who has held it before, much less 7 former leaders who served in his roles from both sides of the aisle. I also had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Frey earlier this week, and he is quite impressive. Should he be confirmed, he will be undeniable champion of science-based decision-making and scientific integrity at the EPA's Office of Research and Development. We're looking forward to hearing more from him today. But before we do, we're going to hear from our ranking member, Senator Capito, for her opening statement. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our 2 witnesses today for being willing to serve. I think it's an admirable trait that public service, and we certainly appreciate those efforts and look forward to hearing from both of you. Thank you, Chairman Carper, for having the hearing. As he has mentioned, Dr. Jennifer Clyburn Reed will be the first to lead the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission, which is going to be an interesting exercise for me to watch since we have the Appalachian Regional Commission in our states, and we've seen how that's developed over the years. And then, of course, the Environmental Protection Agency Office of Research and Development, Dr. Chris Frey. Each of you has devoted the majority of your careers to education, and for that, you deserve a great recognition. I thank you. Dr. Clyburn Reed, and it's nice to see your father in the audience today. I had the pleasure of playing golf with him one time, quite a golfer. I commend you for your service in education at all levels, because you've obviously taught at every level in a lot of different types of situations, and for what you've done for your state of South Carolina. I look forward to hearing about you and what your plans are for the commission. Dr. Frey, I know you have been a college professor for 27 years, including at the University of Pittsburgh and North Carolina State University. And you are now nominated for this position. As we discussed during our meeting last week when we spoke, and I thank you for that, this is one of science, a scientist, not a policymaker or a politician. The research conducted in this office is used to inform critical policy decisions made by the agency's regulatory offices. Establishing public trust requires that the scientific studies are developed in an open and transparent fashion. You and I talked about this, not hidden from robust public scrutiny. Transparency. I take the opportunity every time I get the chance to talk at this dais to talk about the frustrations that I have with this administration on transparency, because it's not only critical in the scientific process, but also in policy proposals and the accountability that accompanies these decisions that this administration is making. I am very disturbed about this administration's lack of transparency, particularly on climate and environmental issues. I have asked repeatedly the EPA and the White House several times now how the new U.S. Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC, under the Paris Agreement was calculated. I am still waiting to hear how that calculation was made. The pledge being to reduce emissions 50 to 52% by 2030. And how is that possible, and what regulations would be put in place to make that possible? Administrator Regan committed to me back in April to provide EPA information used to develop the NDC, and he has not fulfilled that promise. I'm actually going to have breakfast with him next week. I'll have to make sure, not only here in a public forum, but privately, to reiterate this. At the end of October, and after repeated attempts to get information, I still do not have a substantive response. I get the sense that they're slow rolling this information, hoping that this tax and spending spree that we see being squabbled over on the House side would have been enacted by now and overshadowing some of the regulations that this administration has planned. But that hasn't happened yet. Now the administration is trying to have something to present to the climate conference in Glasgow, which will to show the world that it will meet its overly ambitious targets. They appear focused on that audience rather than the American public, workers, their families, and folks that are elected to represent them in Congress, as everybody watches their energy bills begin to skyrocket. Proving this point, in remarks earlier this year, John Kerry, the White House International Climate Czar, called for the U.S. intelligence community to verify the authenticity of Paris pledges by China, Russia, and other countries, stating that I think the president would want to know if something is just baloney or if a country is misleading. This administration has eyes wide open for the pledges of other countries, but they have been closed the door on the accountability to Congress of the American people on what the costs and what the sacrifices and the benefits would be. At the same time, the administration, through an interagency working group, is pursuing options to develop and apply a new cost for emitting greenhouse gases. President Biden wants to use this figure, known as the social cost of carbon, in all areas of federal decision-making. Following several requests from me and other members of Congress, the leaders of the Interagency Washington Working Group admitted that they will not hold a single public meeting on this issue. Despite the potentially wide-ranging effects of their proposals, administration leaders are yet again hiding the ball from the American people. Administration officials make vague, unanimous, or ominous remarks about using untested regulatory pathways to cut emissions. Yet President Biden, still has not put forth a nominee to lead one of the EPA's most significant offices, the Office of Air and Radiation. That's the very office that is reportedly developing the costly and far-reaching environmental regulations the presidents will tout in Glasgow next week. In the midst of a major supply chain and transportation crisis, the president has not put forward a nominee to lead the Federal Highway Administration. The agency responsible to oversee the safe use of our nation's nuclear energy power plants, the NRC, is currently working with just 3 commissioners and 2 vacancies. Instead of ensuring transparency and accountability of the American people, the president has chosen to rely on his climate czars who are sitting in the White House and not accountable to us. Both of us are ready to advise and consent on nominees that the president brings. It is time for him to stop delaying and to nominate individuals for the positions I mentioned and to stop shielding the administration's decisions. This morning, we just have 2 nominees, and they're great nominees, but it should be more. I want to thank you again, Chairman Carper, for today's hearing, and I want to thank our 2 nominees again for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Senator Capito. I think I had breakfast with Administrator Regan maybe a month or 2 ago. I think you'll find that constructive and helpful. And Senator Capito and I try to meet most Thursdays, either in person or by phone if we're on the road. And some of the vacancies that you mentioned that we're looking for nominees, let's just talk about those. See what we can do to shake a few loose from the trees. Okay. All right. With that, thank you for your comments, Senator Capito. Now we look forward to hearing from our nominees. We want to start with Dr. Jennifer Clyburn Reed. Dr. Reed, you are recognized for your statement. Please proceed.
Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of this committee, good morning, and thank you for granting me this opportunity to appear before you as you consider President Joe Biden's nomination of me for federal co-chair of the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission. I also want to thank your staffs for the time spent with me over the past several days. The discussions have been engaging and informative. I am grateful to President Biden for the faith and confidence placed in me by this nomination. If afforded the opportunity to serve, I pledge to prove your confidence well spent and do my family and friends proud. Here with me today, my husband of 29 years, Mississippi native and Florida A&M graduate, Walter Reed. My father.
Did you say Walter Reed?
Walter Reed, yes.
Like in the hospital?
Yes. My father, the Honorable Jim Clyburn, with whom you are probably somewhat aware. Joining me remotely, my son, Walter A.C. Reed, a graduate of Coastal Carolina University. My daughter, Sydney Reed, a Mississippi State graduate and third-year medical student at the Medical University of South Carolina. My sisters, Mignon and Angela Clyburn. My father and sister-in-law, Jackson State alumni, Dr. Walter Reed and Dr. Kathy Taylor. And to the kinship and friendship circles supporting me from home, thank you. I began my professional career 29 years ago as a public school educator with a master's degree. Over the next 25 years, I served as a classroom teacher, a middle school basketball coach, a State Department of Education specialist, Along the way, I earned 2 additional academic credentials, an education specialist and a doctorate from Nova Southeastern University in Florida. I concluded my educational career as director of a teaching equity center at the University of South Carolina, where I also co-founded the Apple Corps Initiative, a teaching, recruitment, and retention scholarship program. I have continued my commitment to education as a committee member of the Emily E. Clyburn Honors College Endowment at my state's only public-supported HBCU, South Carolina State University. Throughout these professional roles, I have remained true to my father's counsel that one should find something to do for which you are not paid. My community service began as a Girl Scout, then tutor at a public housing tutorial center with my sorority sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I served as board chair of the Greater Columbia Community Relations Council and currently serve as president of a nonprofit which promotes first-time home ownership and the preservation and restoration of distressed and abandoned properties. I believe that this background would be beneficial to me as I seek to continue my public service in a broader capacity in a wider community through the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission. The commission, which was authorized in 2008, focuses on distressed economic conditions in portions of 6 states: Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, and all of the state of Florida. 6 states share 2 active regional commissions, the Delta Regional Authority and the Appalachian Regional Commission. If confirmed, my initial goal will be to assess the needs and assets of each community within the Commission's 342 counties and identify challenges and determine the tools needed to progress them from distressed into transitional and attainment status. The Commission would then work closely with economic development districts in partnership with state and local leaders to formulate regional action plans using current and trending statistics with the input of community voices. Believe me, I learned early in my career that one size does not fit all. The Commission would seek to fund entities that make economic development a sustainable priority, while stimulating local entrepreneur development and nurturing private investment. The formula used to target distressed counties through Congressman Clyburn's 10-20-30 plan states that 10% of certain appropriated funds be targeted to persistent poverty communities identified by the Census Bureau, where 20% or more of the population has lived at or below the poverty level for 30 or more years. According to a report from the Congressional Research Service defining persistent poverty counties, there are 407 in the United States. 92, or 22.6% of them, fall within the jurisdiction of the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission. Working in tandem with state and local municipalities to create opportunities to fill gaps in education attainment, workforce preparedness, job creation, and physical and human infrastructure are challenges that beg for cooperation at all levels. And if confirmed, the Commission will not waste valuable time recreating the wheel. Instead, it will consult with other federal co-chairs to emulate best practices. I will carry out the objectives of the Commission to strengthen areas with the greatest needs, and I look forward to working with this committee to ensure that the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission works for all of its citizens. Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee, thank you again for this opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. And Senator Capito, I just, my first thought is the apple did not fall far from the tree. All right. Dr. Frey, we were joking yesterday about how he pronounces his name. A lot of people, F-R-E-Y, they pronounce it Fry, but he pronounces it Frey. He's a big music fan. He loves a band called The Fray from Colorado, How to Save a Life. You're on, Dr. Frey. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Carper. Senator Carper, and good morning, Ranking Member Capito and members of the committee. I'm honored that President Biden has nominated me to serve as Assistant Administrator in the Office of Research and Development at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I also want to thank my wife, Deanna, and my daughter, Lauren, who are with me today for their support.
Which one's your wife?
The really good-looking woman sitting behind me.
Oh, would you raise your hand, ma'am? All right. Nice to see you. Welcome. Thanks for sharing them with all of us.
Thank you, sir. And in fact, she is sharing me with all of you, and I'm honored that she is. I also want to thank my extended family in New York, West Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida who are watching today. Science and the environment have long been my passions and my purpose. I grew up in Lower Manhattan in the 60s and 70s. My family lived in a rent-controlled walk-up building built in the 1880s. There was lead paint on the walls, choking smog outside, and greasy flakes of soot wafted from the sky, smearing my bedroom windowsill. This affected me so much that when I was 8 years old, I wrote an essay titled Pollution. And I posited that pollution is bad for people and animals too. And although I didn't realize it at the time, I identified multiple environmental media, fate and transport pathways, and adverse effect outcomes. My father typed and copied my essay and gave it to all of our neighbors. This was my first publication. I traced my career and my passion and purpose to that essay and to my firsthand experience with environmental pollution while growing up. My parents instilled in me a passion for the environment as well as a sense of duty to serve the public. My father served honorably in the United States Marine Corps. After his military service, he became an oceanographer and a professor. He spent the last 22 years of his career with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and he now rests at Arlington National Cemetery. My mother's passion was art. She was a painter and a writer. Her last book was a novel about dolphins for which she conducted extensive research. Although not rich in a material sense, she had enormous wealth of spirit. She taught me to listen to many different voices, understand how things work, and work with others to find solutions. With my parents teaching me the value of listening, observing, and public service, it's no surprise that I found my way to environmental science and engineering. I've been privileged to have spent most of my career in academia, including 27 years at North Carolina State University. While there, I researched how to improve the efficiency and reduce the cost and emissions of coal-fired power plants. I helped governments and industry develop cost-effective solutions for emissions prevention. I researched improved quantitative methods for uncertainty and exposure and risk assessment. And my research has focused on measurement and modeling of vehicle emissions and human exposure to air pollution. My research has helped inform a variety of decisions, from improving traffic signal timing to reduce vehicle emissions, as well as the selection of ambient air quality standards taking into account uncertainty in risk assessment. As an experienced researcher and professor, I am a champion of science and its essential role in keeping American families healthy and safe. I'm proud of the quality, scope, and impact my work has had, as demonstrated by my extensive peer-reviewed publication record and numerous awards, including the Excellence in Air Pollution Control Award from the Air and Waste Management Association. I've been invited to share my expertise on numerous national and international expert advisory panels. As Senator Carper noted, I've worked multiple times with the Office of Research and Development, and I've served on the Science Advisory Board and chaired the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee. I believe that I have the scientific credentials, expertise, experience, vision, and commitment to serve as ORD's Assistant Administrator and to lead ORD's world-class research staff. Senators, applying science to solve complex challenges that affect the lives of the American people has been my highest priority throughout my career. It would be a tremendous privilege to continue this dedication at EPA. And I recognize, as Senator Capito alluded to, that science is just one of the many factors that inform policy decisions. If confirmed, my leadership will start with listening. The complex environmental challenges our nation faces require an all-hands-on-deck approach, drawing on the experience, expertise, and perspectives of numerous stakeholders, including all of you, Senators. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Dr. Frey, thanks very much for your testimony. Thank you both for your testimony and your presence today. We're now ready to begin with the questions for our two witnesses. Senator Capito and I have agreed to 2 5-minute rounds of questions with additional rounds at the discretion of the chair and the ranking member. To begin, this committee has 3 standing yes or no questions that it asks of all of our nominees who appear before us. So I'm going to ask each of you a question. There's a question for each of this. First, do you agree, if confirmed, to appear before this committee or designated members of this committee and other appropriate committees of the Congress and provide information subject to appropriate and necessary security protections with respect to your responsibilities? Do you, Dr. Reed?
Yes, sir, I do.
Dr. Frey?
Yes, sir, I do.
Second question. Do you agree to ensure that testimony briefings and documents and electronic and other forms of communications or information are provided to this committee and its staff and other appropriate committees in a timely manner? Dr. Reed, do you?
Yes, I do.
Dr. Frey?
Yes, I do.
And one more. Do you know of any matters which you may or may not have disclosed that might place you in conflict of interest if you are confirmed? Dr. Reed, do you?
No, sir, I don't.
And Dr. Frey?
No, sir.
Dr. Frey, Dr. Reed, rather, you spent many years as an educator and one who's, I'm sure, taught and inspired other educators. I love to go into schools. I know my colleagues, Senator Capito, Senator Inhofe, do as well. And I really enjoy school assemblies, even with little kids. And I always remember in an elementary school, it was like kindergarten to grade 5. And they had an assembly and a couple hundred kids. The front row was 3rd grade. And I spoke for a little bit. And then so we had a Q&A, and this little girl, 3rd grader, raised her hand, and she said, "Yes, ma'am, what would your question be?" And she said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a United States Senator. Every state, we have 50 states. Every state has 2 senators. You have rules for your school, don't you?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Rules on your bus?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Rules at home?" She said, "Yes." I said, "We have rules for our country." And along with another senator, Senator Chris Coons, and our Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, I get to help make the rules for the country. A little boy sitting next to her raised his hand. I said, "Yes, sir, what would your question be?" He said, "What else do you do?" And I told him that I try to help people. And one of the ways that we try to help people is to, make sure they have clean air to breathe and water to drink and on and on. But if those 3rd graders had been asking you what you would be responsible for doing if you're confirmed for this position, how would you explain it to them that they and their parents and others could get a real appreciation for a position that's basically gone unfilled for, I think, decades? And we talked to Senator Capito talked about this administration has not filled every seat that could be filled by a nominee. But this is a job that has gone like decades. Nobody, Democrat or Republican, has ever nominated anyone for it. So that's about to change. That has changed. So go ahead, please. What do you do? What would you do?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. And I envision having several conversations with many of my former students and their children at this point to let them know that my vision has not changed from when I taught them in school, and that is to help them become better citizens, to help their neighborhoods become more conducive to living and learning and growing and prospering. So the commissions, they all have a purpose, and that is to create strong infrastructure, to create job development environments that are safe and promote private investments and entrepreneurship, to really get that infrastructure, particularly in looking at broadband in the last mile. So the commission will work with local leaders at the grassroots level and help them at their level. And I've told people time and time again, the closer your government is to you, the more they influence your lives. So that is the level of influence in which we would help, and the commission would help that level so that lives can be impacted immediately.
All right. I'm going to ask you to give us some preliminary answer to the question I'm going to ask right now. Question is this, and you can answer further for the record, all right? Are there ways that other agencies, or even Congress, even this committee, might be of help to you as you stand up this commission and lead it? How can we be helpful?
So thank you for the question. Other agencies that will be helpful, particularly your committee and Congress, first of all, would be the appropriation of funds to help the commission get off the ground. As we noted earlier, this commission only exists on paper, so we would need to create small committees to stand up the committee in the Southeast region. Priority will be looking at where to have a presence. Where would that presence be as a physical structure, and then move outward and broad, in a broad sense, to meet those people who are at the table and at the grassroots level. I think that was.
All right, that's a good start.
Yeah.
Let me just note, as it turns out, there's I think 7 of these regional commissions. This is one that we're trying to stand up now. One of them is Appalachian Regional Commission, which is a big part of West Virginia, and the chair is somebody you know. It's Gail Manchin, and Dr. Reed told me she was on the phone talking to Gail Manchin the other day. And I like to find out what works, do more of that. And one of the best ways you can do that is just reaching out like you did with the Gail Manchin and the other regional commissions, find out what works and what doesn't. And I'm sure they'll be happy to help you. All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Senator Capito.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Do you want to go in front of me?
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the opportunity to move ahead of you and get over to another committee that I have. No, I'm not ahead of you. But, well, let me first of all say, Ms. Reed, that I unfortunately only served with your father for a year and a half. But that was a very rewarding year and a half, and I consider him to have remained a good friend in that time. Dr. Frey, one more time.
Frey.
Frey.
Thank you, sir.
That's it.
Just like it's spelled.
Yeah, that's it, Frey. The EPA's Robert S. Kerr Research Center, I know you're familiar with that in Ada, Oklahoma. It's been there for a long period of time. It's leading the nation on a type of water research known as enhanced aquifer recharge, or EAR for short. And they've done a very good job over a long period of time. As you know, it utilizes natural methods for the capture and replenishment of our nation's aquifers. And for years, Congress has allocated the funding, necessary funding, to keep that going. Now, it was my understanding, and I got this secondhand, so I honestly don't know, Dr. Frey, the source of that, but apparently there's been a holdup in coordinating the local entities as we normally are expecting. Would you make advancing research in this enhanced aquifer recharge a priority if you are confirmed?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Inhofe. This is obviously an important issue for your state of Oklahoma because the aquifer, the Arbuckle-Simpson aquifer in particular, is a major resource for farmers, ranchers, and anyone who drinks water. The program you allude to on enhanced aquifer recharge, ORD staff have been working with the U.S. Geological Survey on engineered methods to use stormwater to help recharge the aquifer. And as you point out, that's being done at ORD's Ada, Oklahoma lab. This is an important priority for us. It's something that I anticipate and would expect under my leadership that we would continue to work with you on this issue, because I know it's important to you and to Oklahoma. And it's also important that the same issues are faced in other parts of the country as well.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and that you are familiar with that program. I understand that you are on a leave of absence from, it's an unpaid academic position that you've had with Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. One federal watchdog group called this Chinese university, quote, anything short of an arm of the Chinese government. Now, I'm pleased that you have committed to resigning this position with this university should you be confirmed. I'd first want to ask you if it would be your intention.
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
And do you share the concerns that we have with China's poor record? They're the largest polluter out there, and on record, particularly as it remains the world's largest polluter, as they still are today. So what are your thoughts about that, and should that be a factor in your confirmation process?
Well, thank you, Senator Info. I
I want to
appreciate.
give you a chance to address that because others have talked about it.
Yeah, and I really appreciate this opportunity. My involvement with research colleagues in Hong Kong is because as an educator, for 27 years, my goal has been to mentor students and to develop new knowledge. And it's a very common practice in academia to seek out international collaborations, especially in areas of science where we can deal with challenging scientific issues that help us push the boundaries of our own science. And so my relationship with colleagues at the HKUST, the university you mentioned, has been one of research and mentorship of students and collaboration, specifically on issues of human exposure to air pollution. I think we all know that that region of the world is facing very severe air pollution, and there's actually a lot of interesting science issues there that we can learn from to inform best science here in the United States. So my work has really been in the realm of the science, not in the realm of the policy or the geopolitical issues that you mentioned. But I will say that when I came on board in my current role with the EPA 9 months ago, I fully disclosed all of my affiliations, including this unpaid adjunct affiliation, and I've been following the advice of our Office of General Counsel at EPA and ethics officials. On that advice, if confirmed, I would resign this unpaid adjunct position.
Yeah, it's always been a concern to me that many of the extreme groups that are out there hold a great regard for China and their record, and yet they continue to be the greatest polluter around. I've often wondered how they get by with that. Thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome, Senator.
And thank you, Senator Capito, for giving me some time up front.
Senator Capito, you're next, and Senator Graham, welcome. And once Senator Capito has asked your question, you'll be recognized. You'll be next in line. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Dr. Frey, when we talked on the phone last week, I kind of hit you, I think, with a surprise. So I'm going to talk about the 2019 research paper, of which you were one of many of the authors, that laid out an ideal situation on college football tailgating, which would be a ban on idling, charcoal grills, and old generators. Well, we decided that this was not realistic, and you did tell me that you grill out at least 3 times a week.
I do.
And you are fuel agnostic. So thank you for clarifying that world-changing research paper, because, and I can imagine those South Carolina Gamecocks would not be for that either.
That's the only reason we go.
Well, nor the wolf pack, to be honest.
Nor the wolf pack,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's talk a little bit. You wrote a letter to the editor in the Raleigh News and Observer taking on the Clean Power Plan claims. And in the letter, you disputed assertions that the Clean Power Plan was, quote, an act of overreach. You're going to be dealing with this, and I would imagine are going to be asked to do research in this area. As we know, the Clean Power Plan has fallen, and there is speculation, at least we're hearing, that there's going to be something that comes in to fill the space. I guess, do you believe that EPA acted within its statutory authority when it issued the Clean Power Plan, and should EPA use the Clean Power Act to regulate a power plant's carbon dioxide emissions outside the fence line?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Capito. And obviously, carbon emissions from power plants are a substantial issue of national environmental interest. In my career, early in my career, as a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University, I did research with the U.S. Department of Energy laboratory in Morgantown, West Virginia, where I was doing techno-economic assessment of clean coal technologies. And I've done a little bit of work looking, for example, at carbon capture in some of my research as well. So I know this is an important issue. With regard to the letter that you reference, a colleague and I were mainly addressing what we viewed as just some factual issues in an op-ed that had been published a week or so earlier. So we weren't so much getting to the legal authority for the Clean Power Plan, and I do know that's an issue of robust debate on the part of multi-stakeholders. And certainly, if confirmed as an assistant administrator for the Office of Research and Development, it's really not my swim lane or space to weigh in on those legal policy issues. My commitment would be to lead ORD to provide the science that's needed to inform those kinds of decisions on the part of our partner program offices that would be considering those legal and policy issues.
So I would urge you, should you, be in this position, that this is where the transparency aspect comes in. I mean, not to shield part of the research or part of the science that comes from, maybe sometimes it doesn't say exactly what the policymakers want it to say. We know that happens frequently. Yeah. So I would just make that plea again for the transparency. Dr. Clyburn Reed, you mentioned 342 counties in the Crescent. As I spoke about in my opening statement, I have quite a bit of experience with the ARC and the great work can do. You said a couple things in your opening statement that are important. First of all, is partnerships. A commission can't do it all. You have to work with your local, all up and down the spectrum from private to public entities. So that's good. The other thing I would say, you mentioned the persistent poverty counties of 92 counties. I mean, you're going to have to prioritize. Obviously, if you're starting anywhere, you've got to figure out where you can have the biggest bang for your buck, but also make the most, as you said, make the most of impact with what you have. Is that how you would prioritize in terms of the lowest poverty? I mean, I would recommend that myself, I guess is what I'm saying. Start with the places that you can really make improvements on. And I liked your talk about broadband and answer to one of the questions, because that's one way I think that you can see measurable improvements. So have you thought about these 92 persistently poverty counties? I'm sure many are some are in South Carolina, not everywhere. And so how would you attack that kind of economic development issue?
Thank you for that question. And yes, those 92 counties are really concerning. That's a lot.
Right.
Okay. So first, as I've had a conversation with Gail Manchin in the Appalachian, I will have a conversation with her chief of staff as well, as to how they go about prioritizing, and we would mirror our actions after what the ARC actually does. In looking at the needs of my state in particular, one size does not fit all, like I said before. So the grassroots level community leaders, this state, working at the state level with the governor's office, we would come up with a plan that would be conducive to the state that we're in. And every state will be responsible for doing that, every governor. So we will look at 7 different plans, and then we will prioritize those particular counties first, and then move from there.
Well, I would imagine with your background as an educator, you have a good reach into that aspect of persistent poverty. What's the education availabilities, levels, and all of those kinds of things that I think probably contribute to some of the factors of the high poverty levels. So I will turn
Absolutely.
to Senator Graham.
Well, thank you. Thank you both very much, Senator Carper and Senator Capito. I'm here very quickly because I got a hearing in judiciary to give my wholehearted support to Dr. Clyburn Reed for this job. I have known her and her family quite a while. This is an excellent choice. She will do a great job. I know the entire family is proud, but all of us in South Carolina are very proud of the fact that you'll be the co-chairman of this organization, and I just want to thank you for being willing to serve.
Thank you, Senator.
And I just echo what Senator Capito said. Broadband is a game changer. We've learned from COVID, if you can't go to school and you're stuck at home and the internet doesn't work, your kids fall behind. That telemedicine is the future. Getting to the doctor, you don't have to get on the road as often. You can consult your doctor if you have the right technology. That keeps people off the highway and keeps us safe and allows medicine to be done in a new and different way. So as the electric co-ops changed rural America about 75, 80 years ago, I think broadband is going to be the equivalent of that for the 21st century and beyond. And I want to recognize the work your father's done on this. And Jim's here, so I know he's here as a proud father and as a distinguished member of Congress and a very well-known and respected South Carolinian. So I look forward to helping you with this nomination. And when you get the job, I want to do what Senator Capito did, said let's put all of our resources into upgrading these rural counties who have been left behind, and many of them predominantly African-American. And Mr. Frey, I'm glad to see that you've changed your opinion about charcoaling at ball games, so all's good. Thank you both.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks very much for joining us, Lindsay. I want to turn now to maybe a question for Dr. Frey. Dealing with experience and goals for the EPA Office of Research and Development. Dr. Frey, before joining EPA earlier this year as the Office of Research and Development's Deputy Assistant Administrator for Science Policy, you already had significant experience working with the agency, including 10 years in which you served as a member of the EPA's Scientific Advisory Board, a member for Pfas Scientific Advisory Board, and a member and chair of the EPA Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee. How has this experience informed your approach to leading the Office of Research and Development, and what are your goals for this office if confirmed?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Carper, for that question. And those experiences that you referenced have been very influential and formative in my preparation, if confirmed for this role, through all of those federal advisory committees that I've served upon. What I've learned from that is how incredibly important it is that the agency have access to the independent external scientific advice of world-class experts who are leading scientists in their respective fields. And also, the problems we face transcend so many boundaries, including boundaries of scientific disciplines. And we really need, all scientists on deck, just like we need all hands on deck more broadly. And these committees are an important way that we engage with the External Science Committee in an open and transparent manner, including public comment and the opportunity for our external experts to hear the views of multiple stakeholders and consider that in providing their advice and peer review to the agency. So it's a critical role. In terms of my priorities, if confirmed, my 3 biggest priorities, number one, ORD has an outstanding career workforce, and I'm so proud to work with the career scientists and all the support folks in ORD. We need to be positioned for emerging challenges and for challenges of the future. And so it's critical that with the resources available to us from Congress, that we hire scientists in key disciplines that will move us forward, and also that our workforce becomes more diversified and that our workforce looks more like the America that we're serving. Number two, we have so many high priority, urgent scientific challenges from the president, from the administrator, and what we're hearing from our state stakeholders, tribal stakeholders, community stakeholders, and the scientific community. Issues that I think you're all well aware of: climate and environmental justice, Pfas, lead, the aquifer recharge that Senator Inhofe referred to, harmful algal blooms, and many, many others. And so ORD is a national resource, and I would be very proud to lead the science team at ORD to meet the science needs of the country and the agency. And then the last thing is we really need to help solve problems, but we have to do so, as Senator Capito alluded to, with credibility. And it's important to me that we do our science with integrity, and that we develop and translate the best available science to inform all of our partners. We need to do policy-relevant science that answers policy questions, but we need to do rigorous best available science, and that's the role of ORD.
Good. Thank you for that. Dr. Reed, you had a chance to actually take a shot at the question I'm going to ask you right now, but I want to, if you want to amplify on what you said earlier, go ahead. But here's my question. How does your experience in South Carolina inform your understanding of what the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission can do for communities across the Southeast Crescent region?
Thank you for that question. My experience in South Carolina in education, let's start there first. As an educator, it is my job to do long-range plans. So looking at our long-range plans as an educator, I make monthly goals, then weekly lesson plans, then daily lesson plans. So this is a process that I've done for over 30 years. So in approaching the activities of the Southeast Regional Commission, I would start with a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, then we would outline the needs and the assets of each one of the communities in each one of the states. Particularly in South Carolina, we have seen how the lack of broadband in several areas has cost us economically. And the primary goal of the commission is economic development. So we would need to fill the gaps in our state and in other states where those gaps are, so that we can grow and prosper economically across the region.
All right, great. Thanks for that response. Senator Capito.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Frey, I wanted to ask you, I mentioned in my opening statement that there is no nominee for the Office of Air and Radiation. If there were a nominee, I would ask this nominee this question as well. But apparently Joe Goffman, who is the current unconfirmed head of the Air Office, has said that the administration is working on an initiative regarding the power sector. So that leaves us all to guess. What is that? It could be a suite of regulations to drive down carbon dioxide emissions by squeezing the power sector through regulations on issues other than carbon dioxide, like emissions, water, waste, and the net effect being to force coal and perhaps natural gas plants to not only reduce operations but possibly close. Are you aware of this initiative that's going on under his leadership, and for which, have you provided research assistance on this?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Capito. Yeah, of course, it's the role of ORD to provide scientific support and advice and information to support the work of our program offices. And ORD, for example, has a capability to do energy mix modeling and life cycle analysis, and also to look at the health effects related to the operations of the energy sector. So these would be the kinds of support that we can provide. And certainly there are discussions within the agency on initiatives, but as far as, specific details of what the Office of Air and Radiation is considering, I would have to defer to that office, since, our focus is on the science and not the policy. But I'd be happy to take your question back with me to the agency.
Okay, well, I guess my question too was, to your knowledge at present, has this already involved the Office of ORD to bring forward specific studies that would help with this regulatory goal? Or you're not aware, you want to get back to me on that?
I think I would want to get back to you
Okay.
on that to give you an accurate
Okay.
answer.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Also, the Office of Research and Development oversees the Integrated Risk Information Center, known as IRIS. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yes. The IRIS program, and I guess you must have been alluding to this a little bit, the health hazards of certain chemicals, hazard assessments are then used to help health standards. This is an issue that I'm very concerned about as it relates to the PFAS issue. The GAO has criticized EPA for the length of time to complete a IRIS hazard assessment. The agency has been further criticized for the lack of usefulness of some of those assessments. Could you describe to me how you could modernize this system and this program to respond to some of the previous criticism?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yeah, the IRIS program has been with the agency for well more than a decade, I think longer than that. And in my own career, in addition to the service I've had on EPA advisory committees, I've served on a number of National Academy of Science bodies, including the Board of Environmental Studies and Toxicology, that's done a number of studies that oversee and have provided advice and peer review of IRIS. So I know that over the years, IRIS has undergone maturation as a result of the expert peer review advice from the National Academies. In recent years, the staff have modernized approaches on things that we call systematic evidence mapping and related techniques for assessing the overall body of evidence. And this has been based on recommendations from the National Academy of Science. We also are very mindful that in using resources for this program, we need to complement and not be duplicative of any other resource use in the agency. And so we do coordinate very closely with our partners in the program offices. IRIS assessments do serve the needs of science, of really all of the regulatory programs, the air, water, land, and chemicals offices. And we work very closely with the programs as well as the EPA regions to understand for what chemicals do they see a need for assessment, so that when we do an assessment, it's on a chemical for which they need information that serves a practical purpose.
All right, thank you. Thank you both.
I'm going to refocus a little bit on PFAS. That's something that an issue that Senator Capito and I focused on a lot, especially given the challenges they faced in West Virginia with PFAS and many other states, including Delaware, around Dover Air Force Base in particular. But as you know, last week, Administrator Regan, this is for Dr. Frey, Administrator Regan released a comprehensive strategic roadmap that lays out the agency's plans to address the complicated challenges of forever chemicals known as PFAS. Considering the role of the Office of Research and Development, I expect that your office would have a significant role in this effort. The question is, under your leadership, how will the Office of Research and Development support the implementation of EPA's PFAS roadmap, which was announced and laid out earlier this month?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Carper, for that question. And in the PFAS roadmap, one of the very first premise of that is research. And the president and the administrator are committed to a science-informed approach on PFAS. And so ORD will certainly have, and if it confirmed under my leadership, will have a front and center role on developing the science to support our partners throughout the agency, but but also outside the agency, as you allude to. Many states are dealing with PFAS, tribal communities, communities in general. And so there are three main things that will be my focus. Number one is we actually need to develop more methods to measure PFAS in the environment. There are literally thousands of PFAS, and yet there's approved methods for really only, a dozens or so. And we need to be able to measure them in multiple environmental media. And this is one of the research areas where ORD will contribute. And this is necessary. We have to measure it to be able to manage it. The second is ORD is, I think, leading, providing world-class leadership on how to do the toxicity testing so that we can understand the human health and environmental effects of PFAS, recognizing because there are so many PFAS, they're not all the same, and we have to account for variations among different PFAS to have effective management schemes. And then the third is we have to know how to manage PFAS. What can we do to remediate PFAS or to treat PFAS in drinking water or wastewater or to destroy PFAS? And these are technologies that ORD is assessing and providing advice to our partners.
You talked earlier about wanting to be guided by science, and I think that's great. We hear that. We want to as well. We also want to make sure that we make some progress. In the last administration, I think it's unfair to say we wasted 4 years, but we didn't get much done in the last administration. I'm pleased that this administration has laid out a roadmap, and Senator Capito and myself and others on this committee are anxious to make sure that we make real progress in the next months, as well as the coming year. How to save a life? There's a lot of ways we can save a life, but one of the ways we can save a life is just make sure we focus on PFAS and getting it right, and we're intent on doing that. I have maybe one last question, and I'll yield to Senator Capito for any last questions or comments that she wants to make. But let's talk a little bit about tribal nations. We work on this committee a fair amount with tribal nations, which was a surprise to me when I joined the committee, but it's a pleasure and a privilege. But if you're confirmed, how will the Office of Research and Development work with tribal nations across our country to improve the natural environment and health of indigenous Americans?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. You alluded to my current role at ORD, and so I've been with the agency for about 9 months, and one of my priorities in coming on board has been to engage with tribal communities and tribal representatives. I'm really proud that the Office of Research and Development has a Tribal Science Council, and we have a collaborative model of working in partnership with tribal representatives from across the country on identifying science issues and working together with tribal scientists to address those issues. And certainly we're hearing from our tribal partners about climate change, environmental justice issues, water resources. But we also have to recognize the importance of traditional ecological knowledge and tribal lifeways as factors that are important to tribes in identifying problems tribes think are important. And we have to be careful not to assume that, in our offices in Washington, we know the answers that the tribes need. It's very important that we engage with tribes. And I mentioned in my opening remarks that my leadership will start with listening. And I have been listening, to the tribes. And as part of our research planning efforts, which are actually ongoing at this time, we will be doing formal consultation with tribes to internalize their concerns into our research agenda.
Okay, thank you. Senator Capito, any last thoughts or questions that you'd like to add, please?
No, I'd just like to thank both of you for being here and your families and your support. Again, I just want to express my gratitude for your willingness to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
I would say I want to second that emotion. But we want to thank you both for being here today, Dr. Reed. A real pleasure to see you in person. And Dr. Frey, thank you for being here today and teaching us how to pronounce your name.
Thank you, sir.
We're grateful for both of you for your willingness to serve our country, especially at a time addressing our nation's environmental challenges. There's plenty of them, but also fostering economic development is so critical. Dr. Reed, I spent some time as governor, actually before that, focusing on job creation, job preservation. And the Appalachian Regional Commission, a lot of that commission is included in the state that Senator Capito represents and say I was born in. And I mentioned to you when we spoke earlier this week, governors don't create jobs, senators don't create jobs, presidents don't create jobs. Even chairs of commissions, regional commissions don't create jobs, but we help create a nurturing environment for job creation. And I mentioned the Center for Excellence, Automotive Excellence in Southern Delaware, where it's housed at the Delaware Technical Community College campus. But it's a partnership that involves auto dealers, poultry industry folks, the Economic Development Administration, Sussex County, State of Delaware, all the above. And it's sort of like we take our ropes and pieces of ropes and tie them together to create a community rope. That's the best economic development I've ever seen is where we do it in that as a partnership. And you're going to have an opportunity to help provide some of the rope and help tie those ropes together. So make the most of that. Again, I want to say to your families that are here, particularly to your dad, Miss Dr. Reed, great to see him, and I want to thank him and your mom for raising you and preparing you for all these opportunities you've had. And I would say it again to Chris Frey, Dr. Frey. I know your wife is here, and I want to say thank you for your willingness again to share your husband. Is that your daughter over your right shoulder? And what is her name?
Lauren.
Lauren, very nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. You've done a really good job raising your dad. And you can be proud of the way he's turned out. Let's see here. I would, if I could be serious for a moment, we understand it's not hard to understand why the president has nominated each of you for these important positions, and our hope is that you can get confirmed without delay so that you can go to work, assemble your team. One of the most important things to do is assembling the team. You have a great opportunity, Dr. Reed, to put together a team, assemble a team right, like it's like you have a blank board and make the most of it. Just find the best people you can and surround yourself with them. But I think with that, before you adjourn, maybe a little bit of housekeeping. And I want to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a variety of materials that include letters from stakeholders and other materials that relate to today's nomination hearing. Is there objection? Hearing none. Hearing none. Senators will be allowed to submit questions for the record through the close of business on Wednesday, November 3rd, and we'll compile those questions, send them to our witnesses, and ask our witnesses to reply by Wednesday, November 10th. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.